It's lovely to see you all.
Abby Titmus, a woman so pointless, she is a genuinely valid argument for the reintroduction of slavery.
Oh, have you been told it's gravity? No. Foot glue! Does this have any place here? Would a dose of comedy benefit teachers and pupils alike? Can teachers learn anything about controlling a class from the stand-up skills of professional comics? Would pupils' essays be tighter if they studied the techniques behind writing one-liners?
Velcro, what a rip-off.
Or would introducing comedy into the classroom lead to a complete breakdown of law and order in schools?
You can't tell somebody who's not by nature a comedian or a humorous performer, go out there and be funny.
I'm Natalie Haynes. I'm now a stand-up comedian and broadcaster, but in a former life, I was probably the funniest teacher of classics that the public school system has ever known. I left the world of education behind because, to be honest, it was just too serious. I'm convinced teachers and pupils alike would benefit from an injection of the funny, but as someone who now makes a living by telling jokes to strangers, do I really know what I'm talking about? Does humour have a place in schools? I'm going to take you on a journey across the length and breadth of Britain. Well, okay, some of England, to find out. So I've been thinking, I had a very easy time as a teacher because I only taught in boys' boarding schools, which are incredibly well disciplined. Their parents are paying a fortune for them to be there, so they all behave pretty well all the time. And what I need to do is find out if humour could still work in a less disciplined school, let's say, of which I have less experience. But I think Shazia Mirza, another comedian who used to be a teacher, she probably does know, because she used to teach in an East London comp, which I suspect was a lot less, let's say, serene than Winchester College.
When I was growing up, you see, my mum always used to say, this life is not for having fun. You'll have fun in the next life, in paradise. But then I think, you know, which is all well and good, but what happens if you get to the next life and God says, well, didn't you have fun in the last life? You know, I left you DVDs and pornography, those were the clues.
Since leaving teaching behind, Shazia's performed her award-winning stand-up on stages around the world and has even appeared on Have I Got News For You? So were you a deliberately funny teacher? Were you trying to be funny, or were they laughing with you or at you?
I'm afraid I was not a deliberately funny teacher. Everything I did was by accident. I mean, I did tell a few jokes and the lads would go, God, miss, you're not funny. Let's get back to science. The thing is, because science, they think of it as a really boring subject. I mean, I tried to make that fun. I mean, obviously, there was the few that tried to set the lab on fire and, you know.
But I think we probably had not just different experiences in teaching full stop, but especially different experiences in how we could use humour, because I would be lying if I said I needed humour, particularly as a disciplinary device. When their parents are paying 20 grand a year, they will behave, otherwise they get thrown out, and then their parents are angry, and their parents angry is not a pretty sight.
Oh, mine was the opposite. Anything, humour, shouting, screaming, whatever I could do to contain these children in the classroom for an hour. It was very mixed ability, a lot of behavioural problems, a lot of social problems. And for me, it was anything, humour, entertainment, shouting, screaming.
You were prepared to use pretty much anything at your disposal to keep them down.
Anything that was legal.
I think that teachers might well think that if you bring humour into the classroom, you're opening a can of worms that can end up in complete chaos really quickly. I'm really interested to find out from Shazia that actually the opposite turned out to be true for her, that she used her humour and her general funniness to maintain authority, to maintain discipline. So she's kind of turned what I was thinking on its head.
I tell you who's a dark horse, Black Beauty. If I say I was working in Burger King, Andrew Lloyd Webber walked in. He said, give me 2 Whoppers. I said, you're good looking and your musicals are great.
As an observational comic, it takes me ages to get to the point. I'm always in awe of comedians who can get a laugh with just a quick one-liner.
Velcro, what a rip-off.
I wish my pupils could have written that efficiently. So who better to talk to about the art of brevity than the man who once told a world record 499 gags in a 1-hour set? Tim Vines agreed to talk, but on one condition. We meet in the noisiest cafe in London. When I was teaching, quite often when we were trying to get children, especially ready for exams, where they have, 2 marks for a question, and you need to get them to convey the information the examiner is looking for really quickly because they have so many questions, they've only got 90 minutes on a paper, and it was always such a battle, kind of saying, right, you just need to tell them what they need to know.
Right.
Don't include the flap. And essentially you've made a whole career out of only ever conveying what people need to know.
That's true.
It is the hardest
you could
type
say
of
they don't need to
writing,
know
isn't
any of it, but well, I find that it has its sort of pros and cons with it. I mean, it's a constant purifying process. So you're constantly thinking. Even you can be telling a joke for several gigs in a row and think, oh, actually, you suddenly realise I can make that even shorter. I've got a joke where I say one-arm butlers, they can take it but they can't dish it out. That's quite short and there's quite a lot in there. But I could lengthen that and say, I met this one-armed butler the other day, and he was like that. I couldn't see his arm, and he was walking. You could elongate
You could
it.
turn it into a story, but you always go for the just
And to be honest, at times, I think it'd be nice if I did do that. I mean, occasionally I take a joke that could be like a one-liner, but involve a prop and therefore make it slightly longer. I do a thing where I say, now it's time for bread golf. I get a loaf of bread, and I get the audience to count down from 5, then I'll hit it with a golf club, and I say it goes everywhere, and I go, oh, I sliced it.
It's I love the thought of a teacher doing that, but I can't really accept that it's going to happen.
You can't come in skipping, wearing strange trousers and saying, let's play bread golf.
Yeah, I do see that.
We're more used to hearing about the class clown being from the other side. Often the teacher sets himself up as serious, which lends itself open to the class clown to burst his bubble every now and again and get a big laugh from it. So what I'm saying is, kids, you can be funny, but the teachers can't be. No.
I suppose Tim, Shazia and I have it pretty easy compared to teachers. It helps that our audiences are usually drunk for a start. Is getting kids laughing a tougher proposition?
Put your hands together and welcome to the stage your host and compere for today's show, James Campbell. Hello, hello, hello.
Funny things children find funny, really. If I find it funny, they will find it funny, as a rule.
Anybody seen the film recently? Empire Strikes Back? Any Star Wars experts? Yes. Do you remember what happens? Do you remember what he does? No. me. I don't know.
James Campbell runs the UK's first comedy club for kids. To ensure no one else can jump on his bandwagon, he's called it the Comedy Club for Kids.
If you asked me how to become a teacher, I'd be terrified. I wouldn't know where to start. So I know lots of teachers. Some of them are quite funny. I think you have to have a sense of humour to be a teacher, otherwise you can be very miserable. So I think I don't know, I think it's just a question of being yourself, really. I think that's what works with comedy for children. And when I do workshops, when I do as close as I get to teaching, I think it's about being truthful and about being yourself.
So if you get to that fire giraffe, stand underneath it, edge from side to side, wait till the giraffe does a poo, and then roll away with the poo.
James's experience touring schools has taught him something that hadn't really occurred to me. An adult working with children doesn't need to generate all the fun themselves for the class to benefit from a humorous environment.
I tend to work with children. I tend to ask them things like, what's the funniest thing you've ever seen? What's the silliest thing, stupidest thing you've ever done? What's the most embarrassing thing you've done? And they've all got those stories. So yeah, I think you can encourage children just talk about funny things, and that's an easier target than write something interesting or well constructed or grammatical or that will tick the boxes in the national curriculum. Funny they can do if you let them.
So who have we got in the front row? What's your name? Lloyd. That's a good name. If you're a bank, well done.
There are sort of techniques you can practice for making yourself better on stage or better in front of an audience. Pausing is very important, I think. When you're silent, they're silent. And not shouting, speaking softly. You draw people in rather than push at them, I think. So yes, if you watch, it's storytelling. It's storytelling and stage presence, I think. So it's a question of being interesting and in charge. And never showing fear.
Right, lion, rah. Cat, wow. Giraffe, woo.
Armed with James's first-hand experience in getting kids to laugh, it's time to test my central thesis, that laughing helps learning in a combat situation. So here we are at the City Academy in Willesden in northwest London, and I've never been in an academy before. I wasn't expecting to have quite so many, well, floors, brutally, or such high ceilings, but we've set up the experiment. So I'm going to teach a serious lesson and then a funny lesson, and only 5 children each one, so quite small scale, but then we're going to test them all at the end and see which one remembers most, and I'm hoping, obviously, that the funny lesson will remember more than the serious lesson. Okay, so I've got 20 facts about my favourite subject, Roman emperors. Come on in, sit down. But they can't find us any sixth formers to teach. Oh, I wish I prepared something different now. Never mind, I'm going to teach this first class as humorlessly as I possibly can. Ah, classics. How could they be bored? So the first Julio-Claudian emperor, whose reign begins in 31 BC, 31 years before the birth of Christ, was the Emperor Augustus. Emperor from 31 BC to 14 AD. God, I'm even boring myself. Tiberius rules from 14 to 37 AD. This is the dullest I have ever been. And he is followed by the third emperor, a man called Gaius Caligula. Caligula is in power for only 4 years, from 37 to 41 AD. That is the Julio-Claudian emperors. Class, you're dismissed. It was a physical effort making it that dull, and I feel like all our spirits are crushed by it. It was just awful. I don't want to do it ever again. Nevertheless, I've got to. There's another class on the way, but this time's going to be nicer. They're going to get the same 20 Roman emperor facts, but delivered with the full comic force of a professional comedian. Mark Antony's girlfriend was anyone? Yes. Cleopatra. Absolutely Cleopatra. Ooh, were you going to ask a question? Oh man, you totally look like you were like, I'm just getting ready to, and then it just disintegrated into thin air. You've broken my heart. Yeah, don't give me that look like it doesn't matter that my heart's broken. It does matter. Chariot racing is it. You're currently my favourite, well done. Yeah, he is also famous for his love of a horse. No, not that kind of love, but good face. Oh, really? No, it's fine. Has anyone got a single fact in their brains about Roman emperors?
I wasn't alive.
Say again, you weren't alive? Well, no, that's very good point, and valid for almost all of history. His daughter Julia is, for want of a better phrase, an appalling tart. Later, we'll find out which group of guinea pigs, willing volunteers, took in more of those fascinating facts. In the meantime, I thought I'd take in some sea air. So here we are in Brighton, a place I have gigged many times over the years. I've lost count of the number of times I've got the last train home, definitely lost count of the number of times I've missed the last train home. And who knew it would be the same place we had to come to do the science bit of this? Dr. Harry Witchell, who teaches at Brighton and Sussex University, is going to talk to us about the actual physiological makeup of learning and humour. Essentially, he's going to give me a little bit of evidence, I'm hoping, to back up my frankly ill-founded hunch that humour and education go together like that. We're in the North Lanes. I think his office is maybe this way.
From the body's perspective, from the physiology, there might be 2 issues that would be very important for humor and learning. And that would be arousal, that is, how awake and how there the person is, and attention, that is, their ability to take in the information. And in particular, you can imagine that when people are laughing, or if they're appreciating some humor, that will definitely increase their arousal a bit.
So if it's just the state of arousal, rather than particularly a humorous state of arousal that makes it easier to learn, that means if you weren't necessarily a funny teacher, you could try being a scary teacher.
Well, I know that you're cruel, but I don't recommend that. I don't recommend this in this particular instance, because although to some extent you could use fear to create arousal, and there would be some learning associated with it, the learning might be incidental, or it wouldn't be the intentional learnings that you'd want. So the child might be remembering exactly what causes the fear, rather than the issues that you want them to learn that you're motivating with fear.
So do you think there are any pitfalls in bringing humour into a learning environment? Could it all go horribly wrong, or is it all positive?
It can definitely go terribly wrong. The benefits of arousal. It goes up for a little bit, and then it starts to go down a lot if you have way too much arousal. But you might get more arousal by having students stand up. That's certainly going to create some sort of arousal. Whenever you stand up, the level of norepinephrine in your bloodstream, I think it's called noradrenaline here, actually doubles. Another way of creating a slight amount of arousal that's extra is to use unusual stimuli or unusual associations rather than humor. A lot of humor is unusual, but you can get just a tiny extra bit of arousal by using the unusual or the unexpected, whereas humor usually cheese people up quite a bit.
I have a belief that children age up with humour, that as soon as they perceive something as being directed at their age, they immediately think it's babyish and then move up one.
I think that there's definitely going to be an age issue in terms of how much humour can be used and how accepted it is. But a lot of that has to do with the allowances, the rapport between the teacher and the students already. Again, there's always the risk when using too much humour that the teacher does not have enough gravitas to motivate the class and to be taken seriously in terms of the information.
I worry that it might look a little condescending if you walk into a class of kids and get out a puppet or wear a funny wig or something. I worry that they might just think, I'm 14.
Well,
who do you think I am?
I think you've nailed it on the head in terms of getting the humor right for the right age. I think that clowning around, particularly with adolescents, is a high-risk strategy. But, I mean, at a university, it'll be an extreme risk strategy. I could never possibly clown around teaching medical students. I think the best I can hope for when teaching medical students is a few dry remarks sprinkled through the class, and I do mean just a few. But I think with younger students, I wouldn't be surprised if a 6 or a 7-year-old class, a class of 7-year-olds, would have no real issues with someone who said, oh, now it's playtime, let's go wear our wigs or something, and that wouldn't be a big deal.
So I came to see Harry to find out more about how humour works, how learning works, how our brains work. And I've done all of that, but I've also found out even more, I think, about what kind of humour you need to use for a kind of audience, that you need to judge it really carefully so that, just like when you're gigging on stage, you have to think about what kind of kids you've got, how old they are, what kind of humour they're going to find funny. It was great.
Dr. Harry's contribution of pure fact has shown my thesis isn't entirely spurious. And at Alsop School in Liverpool, they've put the theory into practice. Geography teacher Eddie Ormsby collaborated with the Liverpool Comedy Trust on a 6-week pilot project to see if his Year 10's understanding of plate tectonics could be improved by ramping up the comedy.
Leonardo! It wasn't about me being funny, although having to take part in the activities, you had to have a sense of humour. So really the idea was to be as wacky as possible and to do wacky things that that would hopefully get the learning content firmly embedded in the brain. It involved things like using onions. It involved making plasticine models. It involved wearing wigs, using silly voices, or playing back, answering questions in the style of someone. Games like Just a Minute.
Did you ever feel that the comedy side of things, I think it really brings out children who are quite, da-da, look at me. But if you're quite shy, yeah. I think when I was, say, 14, I can't imagine anything that would have filled me with more dread and horror than the thought that I would have to be funny. How ironic, but that I would have to be funny and da-da-da, da-da-da. I would have just been crushed at the very thought of it.
There was one girl who, in the first lesson, felt it. That there was a problem, you could see that, and she wasn't comfortable with it. She didn't come into the second lesson, I noticed, and I got in touch. I saw her then in the following week to say, when we do that again, I won't ask you to get up. I know you stayed off, you missed the last lesson, but you need to come in. Don't worry, we'll come in, but you won't be doing something where it'll mean you getting up in front. Because there was only 3 girls in the group, and the other 15 were lads. And she came in then for the remaining 3 lessons and quite comfortably got involved in the activities when she knew I wouldn't say, okay, Natalie, you can come up, it's your turn to do this. Give us that one.
This is Italy, we are great, we're so good, why not rate? Rome, Napoli, Sicily and Valletta, these are some cities, there is no better.
Bueno, that's all we're after. That's good.
Did you find they all knew more about tectonics at the end of that half-term block than you would have expected them to if you'd done straight lessons?
They didn't know more, and in fact, with some of them, I had to do a crash revision course in the weeks before GCSE to say this was the stuff we were doing when it was funny, and the idea, oh, the onions, oh, the plasticine models, oh yeah, oh, I didn't realise that was to do with that.
Oh, so they dissociated the two things?
Yeah, they remember doing the onion skin weathering with the onion, but I said, well, that's what, it was a rock, the onion was a rock. Oh, I thought the onion was an onion.
It's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah, as you would.
It's made by chefs all the time.
I'll
Do you still take some of the funny stuff? Are you still doing it now?
In every lesson, really, when they come in to my room, I do try to make them smile, and it's very light-hearted. How come my son, but though? He just said.
Yeah, what's your name?
Says, some are ugly.
At any point, did you feel a bit like you might be in Psycho? At any point at all, did you think?
That's enough.
To an objective observer, I look a bit like I'm a murderer. I'm talking to a puppet. There's a room full of children. I could kill. Did you ever think that?
Only when the Times Educational Supplement came in and took photographs, and it was one of the lessons where I wore wigs, and when they were printed, some comments from my colleagues were saying you look like a psycho transvestite.
That's a loving thing to say.
It was a lovely thing, yeah. Well, that was the picture
nice
when I opened the Times Head on a Friday morning and had a look, going, oh my lord, why did they use that? Have you finished this?
No, not that one.
When you use humour confidently, you get a lot of respect from the children, because they know if he can laugh about it, or even laugh at themselves and laugh with us, we won't muck them around, because they know how to laugh about something. And it's much more effective than a disciplinarian approach, which really would struggle working in this school.
So no more full-on comedy lessons for Eddie, but he's found that in more traditional lessons, small amounts of humour can go a long way. So it seems it's not about teachers becoming stand-up comics, it's about cultivating an atmosphere in which humour can thrive. And who better to talk to about that than the unflappable Nicholas Parsons, who's been keeping comedians in check on Radio 4 for 40 years.
Once more, it's my pleasure to welcome our many listeners, not only in this country, but throughout the world, but also to welcome to the programme 4 exciting, talented, humorous individuals who are going to play Just a Minute.
So I'm conscious of the fact that not all teachers will feel that they want to be funny, and many of them probably won't see that the idea of a humorous environment is a good idea at all. So I've come to talk to you because one of the most successful jobs in your multifaceted career is being the best straight man in the business, I suppose. Am I stretching parallels too far to think that teaching and straight man could have anything in common?
You can't tell somebody who's not by nature a comedian or a humorous performer, go out there and be funny. But I think what you can convey to the teacher is have a lightness of touch. Don't get too intense. He doesn't have to go out there and be a comic. He hasn't got to go out there and get laughs. He's got to go out there and have what I call a lightness of touch and generate that magic word, to my mind, fun. And I sometimes think in Just a Minute, to make it successful, you have to exercise control and let them know that you are in control, but every so often you can let it get a little bit out of control and then you rein it in. But at the same time, I use my experience as a straight man comedians, because they are comedians I'm working with, act as a foil. So I'm there for them to have fun at my expense, and I can also come back. I'm not going to be a po-faced straight man like that.
And do you think you need to have a very thick skin not to be too intimidated by the prospect of things going wrong? I mean, you take an incredible kicking on Just a Minute, and you never rise to it. You never show any weakness. It's always grace under pressure.
A true test of a sense of humour is being able to laugh at yourself. But so you laugh at yourself with them, and the audience enjoy it more, and then you actually endear yourself to that audience. And also, you keep your authority.
So I think a lot of teachers will think if you allow this kind of humorous environment to thrive, it's only a very small step from there to disintegrating into chaos. And I think it's very tempting to think if something's funny, it's not in control. But actually, the reverse is true, that by being the straight man in control of all these funny people, your authority never goes down.
Absolutely. And that's very well put.
So talking to Nicholas is always a pleasure, but he completely nailed exactly what I've been trying to find out, that you don't have to be funny to create an environment that's fun, that you don't have to be, bang bang, super jokes in order to create an atmosphere where people are having a good time, enjoying themselves and learning all together. Plus, He asked me to go in just a minute. Brilliant.
So things are looking brilliant for me. But how's my theory doing? It's time for the results of my experiment. You remember I taught 20 Roman emperor facts to 2 different groups? If I'm right about schools needing a little humour, then the kids who got the comedy lesson will have retained more than the ones who got super serious me.
We've got the emperors' names up on the whiteboard, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to attach some of these facts to some of those emperors.
The comedy class are faring quite well. These guys are good.
Right. Sadly wrong. 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 But right. 10 out of 20, so half mark. So that's not bad. You only learned it for 15 minutes.
Now time to test the group who endured the most humourless lesson in history. Surely they can't have taken in anything I was droning on about, can they?
That's Claudius, because he wrote that history thing.
But then again...
He had a speech with Claudius. Retired to the Capri, that's Tiberius.
This boy's doing far too well. He's in danger of undoing my hypothesis.
You did really well. 13 out of 20, so that's fantastic.
Thanks, serious class. You've blown my theory to pieces.
Well, I'm a little crushed, but I feel like it was slightly skewed by the boy genius who knew everything straight away. Oh my God, who saw him coming? Although I was instantly, my spirit was crushed, thinking that's not what was supposed to happen, and I know it's bad science, I know you shouldn't expect an answer, I know you have to set up a hypothesis and then smack it down, I know, but then, truthfully, my spirit soared, thinking that even though I knew I was being really boring, he still absorbed all that information. And irrelevant to our thesis, I'm really glad to know there's one child in 10 who, even when you bore the pants off them, is still going to remember nearly everything. It makes me have hope for the future.